$100.49. That is the price silver touched on January 23, 2026. A number that Wall Street analysts said was impossible just 12 months ago. A number that breaks every model, every forecast, every carefully constructed narrative about what silver should be worth. But here is the number they are not putting in the headlines: 33.45 million ounces. That is how much physical silver vanished from COMEX registered inventory in just 7 days. 26% of all deliverable silver in the entire exchange system gone in a single week. The timing was not coincidental. 3 weeks earlier, on January 1st, China implemented the most aggressive export restriction on a strategic metal since the rare earth crisis of 2010. Silver, the metal that powers every solar panel, every electric vehicle, every semiconductor chip, was suddenly locked behind a licensing wall that only 44 state-approved companies can pass through. The official explanation from Beijing was environmental protection and resource conservation. The unofficial translation was simple: Western markets would no longer have unlimited access to 65% of the world's refined silver supply. Connect those two events. China restricts exports on January 1st. By January 25th, silver breaks $95. By January 23rd, it crosses $100 for the first time in human history. And somewhere in between, 33 million ounces disappear from the only exchange that was supposed to guarantee delivery. This is not a price spike. This is a system failure. But this was only the beginning. To understand what happened this week, you need to understand what has been building for 5 consecutive years. Since 2021, the global silver market has operated in structural deficit. Demand has exceeded supply every single year, draining above-ground inventories that took decades to accumulate. The numbers are staggering. In 2024 alone, the deficit reached 148.9 million ounces. Over the past 4 years, the cumulative shortfall has exceeded 678 million ounces. That is not a rounding error. That is nearly an entire year of global mine production that simply does not exist anymore. The Silver Institute, the industry's official research body, has documented this crisis in plain language. Industrial demand from solar panels consumed over 200 million ounces in 2025. Electric cover production added another 50 million ounces. Artificial intelligence infrastructure, with its insatiable appetite for high-performance computing, created demand that did not even exist 3 years ago. Meanwhile, mine production has remained essentially flat. No major new silver deposits have come online. Existing mines are depleting, and the recycling industry, which was supposed to fill the gap, cannot keep pace with consumption that grows faster than scrap can be collected. The math does not lie. When demand exceeds supply for 5 consecutive years, something eventually breaks. What broke was the illusion that paper prices reflect physical reality. The COMEX futures exchange in New York has been the primary price discovery mechanism for silver since the 1970s. Every day, traders buy and sell contracts representing 5,000 ounces of silver each. The vast majority of these contracts never result in physical delivery. They are rolled forward, cash settled, or closed out before expiration. The system works as long as everyone agrees to play the paper game. But in early January 2026, the rules changed. On January 7th, holders of 1,624 contracts demanded delivery. That represents 8.1 million ounces of silver that buyers wanted to take out of the vault and into their own possession. In a normal month, this would be unremarkable. January is typically a quiet delivery period. What made this extraordinary was the source. JPMorgan Chase, the largest bullion bank in the world, issued 99% of those deliveries. The same institution that has been accused of suppressing silver prices for over a decade was suddenly handing over massive quantities of physical metal. But here's the detail that should concern everyone. Despite delivering 8.1 million ounces, open interest in the January contract actually increased by 1,431 contracts. More buyers were stepping in, demanding delivery in a month that was not supposed to be active. The pattern repeated in February contracts, which saw open interest rise by another 1,564 contracts. Meanwhile, March open interest, the traditional front month, fell by nearly 3,000 contracts. Analysts call this backward rolling. In normal markets, traders roll positions forward to avoid delivery. They want exposure to price, not the hassle of storing physical metal. Backward rolling indicates the opposite. Traders are so concerned about future availability that they are paying premiums to take delivery now, even in inactive months. As one market analyst explained, this pattern indicates immediate scarcity of physical silver metal as traders wish to take delivery instead of merely remaining exposed to the futures price. The signal is undeniable. What came next changed everything. On December 31st, 2025, the Federal Reserve executed the largest single-day repo operation in American history. $74.6 billion flowed through the standing repo facility, dwarfing the previous record of 50.35 billion set just 2 months earlier. Banks used 31.5 billion in treasury bonds and 43.1 billion in mortgage-backed securities as collateral. Someone, or several someones, needed emergency cash on the last day of the year, when most of America was celebrating the new year. The official explanation was year-end liquidity management, routine adjustments to ensure smooth market functioning during the holiday period. But the timing tells a different story. 6 days earlier, on December 26th, the Federal Reserve had quietly injected $17 billion to an unnamed institution. The identity of that borrower remains classified for 2 years under Federal Reserve disclosure rule. Someone needed emergency funding the day after Christmas, and we will not know who until 2027. The pattern is clear. In early December, the Fed removed the $500 billion cap on its standing repo facility, creating what internal documents called operational flexibility. The unofficial translation is unlimited emergency lending with no ceiling. They even renamed the facility to reduce what memos described as stigma, the fear banks have of being seen accessing emergency funds. Connect these events: unlimited facility enabled in December, secret borrower on December 26th, record injection on December 31st, and throughout January, silver prices explode while COMEX inventories collapse. Someone is in trouble, and they are using the Federal Reserve as their lifeline. The dots were connecting. The most alarming development has received almost no mainstream coverage. For the first time anyone can remember, U.S. banks are now net long silver on the COMEX. The Bank Participation Report, published by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, tracks the aggregate positions of banks in the futures market. For decades, this report showed the same pattern. Banks maintained massive short positions in silver, selling contracts they hoped to buy back at lower prices. This strategy, critics argued, allowed banks to suppress prices by creating unlimited paper supply. In September 2025, U.S. banks were net short over 42,000 contracts. By December, something remarkable had happened. The December report showed U.S. banks had flipped to net long for the first time in modern market history. This is not speculation. This is official government data showing a complete reversal in positioning. Reports suggest that JPMorgan, the largest player in the silver market, has accumulated over 750 million ounces of physical silver, the largest stockpile in the world. Between June and October 2025, they reportedly sold off their entire 200 million ounce paper short position, freeing capital to acquire physical metal. The strategy is obvious when you see it. For years, banks profited by selling paper silver and buying back at lower prices. Now, with structural deficits depleting inventory, the trade has reversed. The banks are accumulating physical silver at prices they helped suppress, positioning themselves for a revaluation they know is coming. As one analyst noted, JPMorgan is holding real silver, not paper contracts. This is a key difference from the Hunt brothers' attempt to corner silver in 1980. Back then, reliance on paper contracts led to intervention and collapse. This time, the bank controls actual metal. The predator has become the hoarder. But this was not the final move. While COMEX quoted silver at $72 per ounce in early January, the physical market told a different story. In Tokyo, dealers were selling silver at $130 per ounce when they could find inventory at all. Dubai reported similar premiums. Shanghai physical prices exceeded COMEX by $8 or more throughout late December, an 80% premium for physical silver over the official spot price. This has never happened before in modern markets. Gold occasionally sees 5 to 10% premiums during supply crunches. Silver sometimes trades at modest premiums in specific regions. But a systematic decoupling between paper and physical prices across an entire region represents something new. The implications are profound. Industrial users in the semiconductor, electric vehicle, and solar sectors are increasingly bypassing Western exchanges to secure physical metal at any cost. They fear total depletion of available inventory. They are signing long-term supply contracts directly with miners, effectively circumventing the traditional exchange system altogether. The paper price has become fiction. The physical price is reality, and the gap between them grows wider every week. Market analysts warn that we may be approaching a force majeure declaration on the COMEX. If the exchange officially admits it cannot fulfill physical delivery requests, the paper price would likely collapse or cease to exist as participants flee to the physical market. This would create a gap up where the paper price suddenly aligns with physical reality, potentially overnight. The system designed to discover prices has become the system that hides them. The real story was just starting. China's export restriction is not about environmental protection. It is about strategic control over a metal that Western economies cannot function without. Starting January 1st, 2026, only companies meeting stringent requirements can export silver from China. Exporters must demonstrate annual production capacity of at least 80 tons,
consistent export records from 2022 through 2024, and compliance with environmental and quality certifications. The effect is immediate. Small and mid-sized exporters, which previously supplied significant quantities to global markets, are locked out. Only 44 state-approved companies can now ship silver abroad, and only after obtaining government licenses that can be revoked at any time. This mirrors the playbook China used with rare earth elements. In 2010, China restricted rare earth exports to Japan during a diplomatic dispute. Prices spiked. Western manufacturers panicked. The message was clear: China controls resources that the world needs, and that control can be weaponized. Silver is even more critical. The metal is indispensable in solar cells, semiconductors, electric vehicles, medical devices, and advanced electronics. China already controls the majority of global silver refining capacity. By restricting exports, Beijing is not just protecting domestic supply, it is creating leverage over the entire global energy transition. The licensing framework allows for graduated escalation. Quotas can be tightened incrementally based on geopolitical circumstances. Complete prohibitions can be implemented without warning. Western nations have no quick alternative. Opening new mines takes years. Building refining capacity takes longer. There is no substitute for silver in high-efficiency applications. As one industry report noted, the economic fallout is already evident. Silver prices surged 100% year-to-date in 2025, and structural shortages are likely to persist. China has weaponized a metal most people consider a relic of the past, and that is when things got interesting. The geopolitical backdrop has only intensified the silver rally. On January 18th, President Trump announced tariffs on 8 European countries that opposed his plan to acquire Greenland. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland faced 10% duties starting February 1st, rising to 25% by June, if no deal was reached. The announcement roiled global markets. European leaders called the threats unacceptable. The European Union considered activating its anti-coercion instrument, a never-before-used economic weapon that could restrict U.S. company access to European markets. Gold surged to $4,888 per ounce, breaking records for multiple consecutive days. Silver followed, touching $95, then $98, then crossing the psychological $100 barrier. The Greenland crisis highlighted a deeper shift. For decades, the United States dollar served as the world's reserve currency, backed by American military power and stable institutions. That stability is now questioned. Trade wars with allies, threats against NATO partners, and judicial attacks on Federal Reserve independence have created uncertainty that no amount of interest rate manipulation can resolve. Investors are responding by fleeing to assets that cannot be printed, seized, or devalued by political whim. Gold and silver have served this function for thousands of years. In 2026, they are serving it again. As one strategist noted, gold's rally is about trust. For now, trust has bent, but is not broken. The same logic applies to silver with the added dimension of industrial necessity. Safe havens are being tested, and precious metals are passing. The convergence of these forces creates a scenario that few analysts predicted and few are prepared for. China restricts 65% of global silver supply. COMEX inventories drained by 70% since 2020. Banks flip from short to long for the first time in history. Physical premiums reach 80% over paper prices. The Federal Reserve executes record emergency lending, and geopolitical chaos drives capital into safe haven assets at unprecedented rates. Each factor alone would be significant. Together, they represent a fundamental repricing of silver's role in the global economy. The consensus forecast from major banks was $55 to $70 per ounce. For 2026 average prices, silver crossed $100 in January. The models are broken because they assumed conditions that no longer exist. Industrial users are scrambling. Solar manufacturers in India and Europe face acute supply shortages. Semiconductor foundries are signing multi-year contracts at prices that seemed absurd. 12 months ago, electric vehicle producers are redesigning components to use less silver, knowing they cannot secure enough at any price. Meanwhile, investment demand is surging. Exchange-traded funds backed by physical silver have seen inflows that exceed outflows for the first time since 2020. Coin and bar dealers report wait times measured in weeks, not premiums over spot prices, have expanded even for retail products. The silver squeeze that retail investors attempted in 2021 failed because it relied on paper instruments. The squeeze happening now is different. It is driven by structural deficits, industrial necessity, and institutional positioning. The banks are not fighting this rally, they are riding it, One market observer captured it precisely. The pool of actually deliverable, fully eligible silver is much smaller than the headline figures suggest. What is reported as inventory is often encumbered, allocated, or otherwise unavailable. The crisis is worse than the numbers show. Smart money is not waiting to see how this resolves. Smart money moved months ago. The question now is not whether silver will stay above 100. The question is what happens when the paper market can no longer pretend to function. COMEX has already raised margin requirements twice in 48 hours, forcing leveraged traders to post more collateral or liquidate positions. This is the classic playbook for containing a runaway market. Raise margins, shake out weak hands, restore order, but margin hikes only work when the problem is speculation. They do not work when the problem is shortage. You cannot raise margins on physical delivery. You cannot increase collateral requirements for a manufacturer who needs silver to build solar panels. The metal either exists, or it does not. If delivery demands continue at the January pace, COMEX registered inventory could be depleted within months. The exchange would face an impossible choice: admit it cannot fulfill contracts and destroy confidence in the entire futures system, or find silver from somewhere to maintain the illusion of functionality. Neither option is attractive. Both may be unavoidable. The silver market of 2026 is not the silver market of 2020 or 2011 or 1980. The structural forces are different. The players have changed sides. The geopolitical context is unprecedented. What remains constant is the mathematics of scarcity. When demand exceeds supply, prices rise. When inventories deplete, delivery becomes impossible. When paper promises exceed physical reality, the system breaks. We are watching that break happen in real time. The data points are clear. 33 million ounces drained in 7 days. $100 per ounce for the first time in history. 5 consecutive years of structural deficit, totaling 678 million ounces. 74.6 billion in emergency Federal Reserve lending on a single day. U.S. banks net long silver for the first time anyone can remember. 80% physical premiums in Asian markets. Export restrictions from the country controlling 65% of refined supply. These are not predictions. These are facts, documented in exchange reports, government filings, and central bank data. They point to a conclusion that mainstream financial media has been reluctant to state directly. The silver market is breaking, not because of speculation or manipulation, though both exist. It is breaking because the physical metal required to satisfy demand does not exist in sufficient quantity. No amount of paper trading can change that reality. No amount of margin hikes can create metal that was never mined. No amount of official denial can refill vaults that have been empty. The implications extend beyond precious metals. Silver is embedded in the infrastructure of modern civilization. Solar panels, smartphones, electric vehicles, medical devices, water purification systems, satellite technology, missile guidance system. Every sector that defines the 21st century economy depends on a metal that is running out. Those who positioned early will benefit from the repricing. Those who waited may find that waiting too long carries costs they did not anticipate. The $100 milestone is not the end of this story. It may be the beginning of a chapter that rewrites assumptions about what critical resources should cost in a world where scarcity is no longer theoretical. Watch the COMEX inventory reports. Watch the delivery notices. Watch the physical premiums in Shanghai and Tokyo and Dubai. The official price tells you what traders believe. The vault levels tell you what actually exists. One of those numbers is real. The market is deciding which one matters. This story is not over. The vaults are still drained. The deficits are still accumulating. And somewhere, someone is watching the same data and making decisions that will shape what happens next. The only question remaining is whether you will be ahead of the curve or behind it when the next number drops.